Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining me. For those who do not know me yet, my name is Ron Levine from Mindfulness and Blue Jeans, and I've been practicing mindfulness and insight meditation for almost 25 years. And I was introduced to the practice during a time when I was dealing with clinical anxiety and depression and panic disorder. And my panic disorder had gotten bad enough, it became agoraphobia. I was agoraphobic, so I was unable to leave the house. I was on disability from work and happened to get paired up with a psychologist who had already been practicing and teaching mindfulness and insight meditation for several decades, even back in the late 90s, before mindfulness became the flavor of the month. And that was my start with this practice. I did not think that it was going to do anything. And yet somehow it's managed to do everything. Funny how that works. So here I am, offering this ongoing series of calming anxiety by living mindfully, as a way to share some of the tools and techniques that people have shared with me, that I've stumbled upon for myself. And the one that I'll be offering this morning is one that I've stumbled upon for myself. One of the nice things about doing these regular sessions is that sometimes the things that I share are things that I've been practicing with for, a quarter of a century now. Some of the things that I share are things that I've just been practicing with for the first time myself. Not necessarily earth-shattering techniques, but just something new, a new twist on an existing technique. So the one that I'll be sharing this morning is pretty simple, pretty basic, but it's what I've been working on the last few days. Just to kind of see, where does this go? What's this do? Because that's one of the most integral parts of our practice is experimentation. We try things, we see what the effects are, we see what works, and we figure out what to try next. And that's really all I've been doing for the last 25 years or so, and it's worked out pretty well for me, so I'm gonna keep doing it a little while longer maybe. So let's jump in, okay? Let's begin, as we always do, by imagining that we are suspended from the ceiling by a piece of string attached to the top of our heads. As a nice cue to sit up straight without adding any extra tension to do so. As always, if there's some tension here, be it physical tension, mental tension, emotional tension, that's completely fine. Tension is allowed to be here. There's tension in life. When we try to force tension away, we just bring more tension to the tension that's already here. That doesn't really decrease tension, does it? But if we don't bring more tension to the tension that's already here, it has a chance to process without us interfering. And in my experience, then it has a chance to leave at some point. It may be today, it may not. But we can use our energy to just watch it, instead of wasting our energy trying to fight it. So let's just take a moment and notice what we have brought here with us today. Perhaps there's some tension. Perhaps there is a lack of tension. Either is fine. The point is the noticing of it. And if you haven't already, you may begin to bring your attention to your breathing. And this is the part where I usually make a note that our breathing often changes when we bring our attention to it. Sometimes because we think we need to control or shape the breathing in some way. And I usually offer an invitation to not do that. And that invitation is still open today. But every once in a while, I do work with shaping the breathing. And I'm going to invite that today also. And this is the way that I've been experimenting over the last few days. I've noticed that sometimes my breathing will feel vertical. What I mean is, I can feel it coming in and spreading downward. If the breathing is deep enough, I can feel the diaphragm rising and falling and so forth. But even if it doesn't get that deep, I can still feel it moving in an up and down direction as it flows in and out. Sometimes the breathing feels horizontal. Where the ribs are expanding outward, contracting inward. More of a side-to-side feel rather than up and down. And I found different ways to experiment with this. I can, as I usually do, practice with uncontrolled breathing. And just notice the way each breath feels. Does this feel more vertical? Does this feel more horizontal? Both. At the same time. Or I may try doing some shaping of the breathing, deliberately making an in-breath and an out-breath vertical. Feeling movement in the diaphragm, the stomach. Or horizontal. Feeling the expansion and the contraction in the ribs, side body. Perhaps doing 5 in and out breaths of one and then 5 of the other. Or perhaps alternating on each in and out breath. 1 in and out vertical, 1 in and out horizontal. Just to see. How do they feel? Does one feel better? Take a few minutes. Experiment with controlled or uncontrolled breathing, with whatever kind of alternation you like. Or perhaps you find vertical feels better and you stick just with that. Horizontal feels better, you stick just with that. Lots of different combinations to try. But let this be your primary focus for the next couple of minutes as you experiment. If you find a particular combination that's working well for you, just stick with it. See where it goes. When you just settle on that one. If you find that your mind is straying from our task, just bring it back. Now, this is a simple practice. It's not an easy practice. Part of what's not easy is the fact that it's so simple. The mind gets uncomfortable with such simplicity. Funny, isn't it? It wants more to think about. Wants to feel entertained. Now that's some of what we came to see. Like, oh, how does the mind react when all I have to do is this one simple task? And if the mind can't seem to get away from it fast enough, well, we want to see that. Oh, look at this. Isn't this interesting? And we guide it back. And that's a huge part of this practice, is just guiding it back over and over again. That's why we call it a practice. We're building a new habit, a new skill set. One that's more sustainable, less stressful. Using the breathing and experimentation with the breathing as our anchor. In time, we may find that we may be able to combine our vertical and our horizontal breathing. In times when my breathing has become slow enough, eased enough, I find I can do a vertical breath, and then when that's reached its limit, I still have some space to add some horizontal breathing on top. And everything expands. And it usually feels pretty nice. But then sometimes I can fall into the trap of trying to achieve that when I'm not really ready for it. I remember how good it felt when I did it a previous time, like, oh, I want that again. And then I try to force it. And that never ends well. So it's not something we need to try to make happen. It's not the goal. It's just something to notice if and when it does happen. And the practice is just noticing that it's happening. And when it is no longer happening, we notice it is no longer happening. The point is in the noticing. As we take our practice off the cushion and into the rest of our day, check in now and then. Does my breathing feel vertical? Horizontal? Would this be a good time to shape it one way or the other and see how it feels? Or just leave it as it is and see what it does? It's not about which option you choose, it's about consciously, mindfully making the choice. And seeing what the results of that choice are. And it's through the simplicity of making mindful choices and seeing the results that we craft our entire path. Thank you, everyone. I'll hang on for a few moments if there's anything that anyone would like to ask or share in the chat. Hey, Marcy. Yes, thank you. Yeah, interesting. Never thought about it that way. I've been doing this for 25 years, and I never really thought about it that way. Not consciously, anyway. I mean, I have noticed this sort of vertical and horizontal feeling of the breathing, sometimes, going down the diaphragm, sometimes expanding the chest and the ribs and so forth. That's not new. But I've never really thought about it in terms of, let me try a vertical breath. Let me try a horizontal breath. That sort of dynamic of specifically working with, what happens if I do a few this way and a few that way, or just one and one, or what if I control them and shape them that way, or if I don't control and shape them, which way does each one feel? It's a helpful way to stick with it, because it's really hard, at least for me. I don't think I'm alone in this, to simply watch the breathing and not have the mind start wandering off in 50 different directions. So it's good to develop some techniques to maintain an interest level, a curiosity level with the breathing. And in my experience, we end up discovering that there really is a lot there to see once we have learned how to skillfully direct our attention. The problem isn't that there's nothing there. The problem is we haven't figured out how to see what's there. And that's some of what this session is about. It's like, okay, well, here's a way of seeing. Here's another vantage point. Here's a way we can shift our perspective that helps us stay focused, aligned. And you're quite right that we try different techniques to see which ones work, and then they change. And that's part of this practice is, look, I need to make an adjustment here. That's why this is an ongoing practice, is because even when we find something that works, it doesn't work forever. So we're building the skill of catching when things are no longer serving us, whether it's simply a breathing technique or something much bigger in life. And say, okay, let me make an adjustment here. Let me try this. Let me try that. See what works now. See what aligns now. And then when we find something, we check in. Is this still serving? Is this still in alignment? And it's an ongoing process. Yeah, and I see that resonates with Michelle. Yeah, always changing, always changing. One of the things that the Buddha taught a lot about was this impermanence. And I often quote an American monk named Tanasaru Bhikkhu, who's fond of, instead of saying impermanence, uses the word inconstancy. So when we talk about impermanence, everyone's like, oh, okay, yeah, sure, I get it. Everything's impermanent. We're all going to die, and that's not going to last forever. And blah, blah, blah. Inconstancy has a very different connotation. Everything is shifting and moving all the time. It's not some like, okay, impermanent, it's not going to be here in 10 years. No, it's shifting and moving now. The chair I'm sitting on right now appears solid to me, to my gross sensory organs that are not refined enough to be able to discern what a powerful enough microscope could show me, which is that this chair is really billions, trillions, whatever, of atoms that are all moving, but are packed densely enough that this chair can support me. And to me, to my eyes, to my sense of touch, appears solid. Is it solid? Not really. It's inconstant. It's changing. It's moving right now. Everything is. Donna, yeah. Trying something new and different makes me stay focused. That's, yeah, the mind always looking for something new, something shiny, some new shiny object, right? And that's where curiosity becomes such a helpful component of this practice. And when we're curious, the mind's open. wants to know. Maybe unravel a mystery here or there. Gain some new information. And again, that's some of what today's practice is about, is, okay, let's take the breathing and get curious about this particular aspect of it that maybe we hadn't thought about before. A story that I like to tell sometimes is my first teacher, the psychologist that got me started, tells a story about someone that he was teaching one time. They were just starting the practice and they felt like they weren't really getting anywhere. And so my teacher says to him, well, when you're sitting, what's happening? And this guy says, well, nothing's happening. Really? Nothing's happening. So we've got this body with hundreds of processes happening at any given moment, some in our control, many out of our control, keeping us alive. We've got these minds with billions of neurons firing at every moment. This hive of activity. Nothing's happening. Is there really nothing happening? Or is this a perception that we've developed as a result of kind of checking out mentally for so long and learning to ignore all the stuff that is happening, not just in front of us, but within us? So again, we need to find a way to direct our attention, to refine our focus, to begin to see again that which we have learned to ignore, to turn off, to tune out. And what's interesting is when we start to do that, at least in my experience, it really sustains itself. Because suddenly there's, oh geez, I've been missing that, I've been missing that, and I've been missing that. Holy crap, like, has this been happening all this time? There's this really interesting, I can never remember what it's called or where it is. Every once in a while I'll bring it up in a session and someone will know what I'm talking about and give me the name of it. And of course, I'll then forget it again. I've got to write it down at some point. But I remember reading a number of years ago about this completely and utterly soundproofed room, like this little room that is completely silent. Completely silent. And people, when they go into this room, can't sit in there for more than like 10 minutes before they need to get out, because they start to hear their own pulse, their own heart, all of these bodily processes that we never hear in day-to-day life because they get drowned out by everything else. And then all of a sudden, sometimes for the first time, we're hearing them, and it's very disconcerting. And that's just from sitting in a room that's completely silent. So, nothing's here? Nothing's happening? Is that true? Yeah? Well, Michelle, when is it crossing from being curious and getting nosy? The whole curiosity killed the cat factor. Yeah, well, that's a judgment call, isn't it? This is why we practice. We're not just building our skills, we are also building our skill of building skills. So when we are honing our curiosity, it's not just helping us with discovering more about our object of the curiosity, like the breathing, it is also shaping the skill of learning how to be curious skillfully in itself. Sometimes we may get our hand bit, say, oh, okay, too far. And sometimes we may say, oh, you know what? Geez, I just found something I would never have found otherwise. And that worked out really well. And we remember that. This is the mindfulness aspect of this practice. We're often told that mindfulness is equated with awareness. Awareness is awareness. Mindfulness, as the Buddha taught it, was a function of memory. We remember what we've done in the past that has been skillful. We use that information to help decide what we should try next. We may screw up here and there. That is a part of experimentation. We're probably going to screw up now and then. But we've also been screwing up to get to this point to realize that, oh, maybe we need to try something different. So probably going to screw up either way. Probably going to screw up less if we're paying more attention and have some skillful intentions to act upon. So, how do we know the difference? By experimentation. Same experimentation that we did with the breathing. That's why this is such an extensible, what I call a generalizable practice. The same thing that we're doing with the breathing here applies to all of life. How can I work with the breathing skillfully? I pay some attention, I do some experimentation, I see what the results are, and then I know what to try next, and I repeat the process. Well, how do I live life skillfully? Pretty much the same way. Pretty much the same way. So these skills that we're building on the cushion, I mean, it's good to have a cushion practice, but the point isn't to have a good cushion practice. The point is to be able to take them off the cushion and into our whole lives. And this whole practice that the Buddha taught was simply in the service of how do we decrease our stress and suffering. That's it. That's all he taught. For about half a century, that's all he taught. This is how we go about it. Now, I think that's a good place to wrap up. Thank you all so much for being with me. And take a moment or two throughout the rest of your day or evening and check in. Vertical, horizontal, controlled, uncontrolled. Experiment. See what happens. See where it goes. Thank you all so much, everyone. Hope to see you again soon. Cheers.